The interactive exhibition and networking event African Energy Week 2021 was hosted in Cape Town, South Africa. Its goal? To unite the global and African energy stakeholders and drive growth in Africa's energy sector. We bring you interviews with Senegal's Minister of Petroleum and Energy, the South African Petroleum Agency, and 2 business leaders.
In the drive towards developing the African petroleum market's value chain, where do the opportunities lie for Senegal?
The
opportunity for Senegal is that in 2024 we will produce petrol and gas. So we are here to meet countries and investors that have the know-how to help us regarding that objective. So we're meeting them, we continue the discussions like people like the African Petroleum Organization, and also OPEC, because we need a lot of help and a lot of partnerships to make sure that we enter the oil market with all the partners that are going to be delivering with us in the future.
Take me through the plans and challenges in transitioning from carbon fuels.
At the moment, we're discussing about the energy transition. We have just discovered fossil energy, and we think that we can use them also as carbon financing and accessing those markets. So this transition is not going to go quickly, so we have to take time to make sure that we plan everything properly. Our plan is to use the fossil energy as well as renewable energy together. At the moment, we produce 32% of our energy from renewable energy.
Can you explain your renewable energy model and how you are incentivizing the public sector?
So as I said, we have 32% of our energy that's produced by renewable energy. So we also have a network minds, as we call them like this. So we support local communities in some areas of Senegal, so that the people can have all the activities there as well. So we have zones where we produce milk just by solar energy, and then it allows us to have industrialization in some remote places of Senegal. But we think that fossil fuels and renewable energy has to go together, because we need to develop our countries and use those resources. LNG is also extremely important for development, and it has to go as well with the petrochemical industries. What is a major issue for us is the price of electricity. The price of electricity is extremely expensive in Senegal, and we need to reduce it so we can make sure that it accesses all the population. So our strategy is really to bring those costs down.
We've been talking a lot about hydrocarbons while we're here, but for our viewers, can you explain exactly what is the significance of hydrocarbons for the African continent?
I think there's so the energy transition is obviously very real and it's happening, but it's a journey, and Africa is going to be going at a different pace to, let's say, the Western world or Europe, where electricity is taken for granted. In Africa, we've still got anything from 600 to 800 million people without electricity, energy poverty. So that has to be solved first. And hydrocarbons in Africa perspective are still such a major driver of employment and of revenues for the government. So you can't just turn off tomorrow hydrocarbons. It has to be a transition, and the transition is first majors leaving as they look to rationalise their portfolio, and then looking at oil to gas. So moving away from oil more into the gas side, gas replacing coal, gas replacing biomass, and then ultimately renewables as well.
How do you at Afentra view the current investment climate on the continent?
So we've been, in our former company, Cloke, we've been involved in Africa since the early 2000s. I think the investment potential in Africa at the moment is as exciting as it's ever been. it isn't easy to find the finance that was there in the past, which was in the hydrocarbon sector, the reserve-based lending, the banks. That's much more limited, much more challenging. But where that has exited, there is other finance, more creative finance that is available from traders, from high net wealth individuals to invest in companies and equity. There definitely seems to be an interest in investing still.
As a relatively new company operating on the ground here, has COVID had any type of impact on your business and on the industry in general?
I think that if you take it in two steps, I mean, from a company perspective, we're a very young company, and so earlier in the year and last year we were looking for funds. So from a COVID perspective, actually there was a positive in that we weren't travelling. When we were raising the finance, it would probably take us 6 months of travelling to Asia, to Africa, to America. We did it all via Zoom or Teams. So that was actually a benefit as a small company. Once we now get into what we call the operational phase of procuring and chasing assets, you've got to be on the ground. I mean, I think from an operational perspective, it had a massive impact last year, and I don't think we've still seen the true impact on the other side. You only have to walk around the V&A at the moment, and you can see the restaurants that have gone, the shops. So the knock-on effects, whether it's in South Africa, for the local populations, it's still huge.
What kind of conversations or highlights are coming out of the African Energy Week that are relevant to Afentra?
I think the conversations over the last 3 days, from the ministers starting in the first session to all of the parallel sessions, I think it's incredibly enlightened discussion. I mean, for us, from Afentra's perspective, we're looking at investing in producing assets. From a conference perspective, the key people for that have been here for discussions, meeting up with ministers, and understanding that the transition is a journey, that the opportunities are still going to be here for a number of years.
Do you feel that the conversations and commitments that are taking place here at African Energy Week will get to a point of fruition, will get to a point of actually being implemented?
I think there's a genuine desire, yes, from whether it's just the panellists, the discussions in the hall, to the ministers. I mean, I've just come off a panel discussion with His Excellency, the Minister of Equatorial Guinea, and he was talking about what incentives need to be made to encourage investment into the country. I think that will happen, and I think you've had the same conversations or the same discussions with other ministers.
What can we expect from Afentra in the short-term future?
So in the short term, I mean, at the moment our share price is suspended. We've been announced as one of the bidders in the Senegal divestment round. So that's on Block 305, which is a major producing asset for Senegal, and we've submitted a bid there amongst, I think, 6 or 7 others. Another block there, Block 23, and then there's other deals that we're looking through at the moment. So I think near term, as we look at it, there's probably a couple of non-operated deals, and then we're setting ourselves up to be an operator, and we'd hope to have maybe next year a bigger material operated deal.
You as CEO, what's your ultimate vision for the company?
I think it's all of our ultimate visions. The three of us, Paul, myself, and Anastasia. We've got an absolute passion for Africa, having been involved in numerous countries, more on the exploration, development, production side in Ghana, Uganda, and Kenya. But we see an opportunity to build a material production company. Firstly, starting off in the oil space, making the assets better. So a lot of the assets that will be divested will be dirtier, high carbon. We see an opportunity to clean those up. And then we see an opportunity to get into the gas space as well. There's a number of small discoveries, small TCF up and down West Africa, which are not big enough to go to LNG, not too big for the local market. We see that actually that with a bit of innovation that you can develop those. So that'll be sort of phase 2 as well. I mean, the journey that Africa's going on at the moment isn't a new journey in terms of Gulf of Mexico and the North Sea. That's been going on for 25 years, and it's got another 25 years to run. So when we look at it in Africa, we see this as almost the beginning of the journey that other basins have gone through. So a really long time to potentially run, and actually an opportunity to be part of the more general energy transition.
One more question. Do you feel that Africa has the skills and knowledge to be able to take your vision?
Yeah, I think that it's a really easy question to answer. Absolutely yes. And in our former company, we really focused on local content. It was at the heart of what the company did, and that will be the same with Afentra. We see no need to have a big base in the UK, although that's where we're listed. From a governance perspective, it'll be a very small office there with everything being done in country, because the skills exist here. I mean, the teams I had in the past, I've had Ugandans working in Cote d'Ivoire, going to Kenya, going to Zambia. So the skills are there. I've had drilling engineers that came from Ghana working in Guyana. So it's all on the continent, in the mother continent.
You've been leading PASA for just over a year now. What is your mandate during your time in office?
During our time in office, the minister recognized the fact that we've got a lot of petroleum resources as a country, so we're well endowed with oil and gas as South Africa. But as you know, we import all our gas requirements as a country, and we import all the crude oil that the country consumes. This has got a negative impact on our balance of payment, and since all the hard currency that we have as a country flowing out of the country, therefore the minister made it clear to us that we've got to accelerate the development of our own petroleum resources so that we can support the recovery of the economy.
South Africa imports oil, gas and petroleum products for its energy needs.
Yeah.
How is the upstream petroleum industry gearing up towards localizing resources?
We really are. As I said, in terms of the mandate from the minister when I assumed office, we've got to make sure that we accelerate the development. Fortunately, we have been successful. South Africa made the largest gas discovery in 2019. We followed up by another successful world-class discovery in 2020 by Total and its partners. So we are supporting the JV partners of the Block 11B, 12B exploration companies on our south coast to make sure that these assets come to commercial production latest end of 2025.
So speaking about those two projects, I believe they are the biggest petroleum discoveries in South Africa. Can you take me through the impact that will have on the industry?
Yes, definitely these are the biggest discoveries that South Africa has ever seen. And as I said earlier on, we import all the gas requirements into the country. So you can imagine that if we were to bring this to commercial production, for starters, we will save all the foreign currency that we use as a country to import the gas that we do. Secondly, these assets on our south coast give us a big opportunity to provide sustainable supply of feedstock into our gas to liquids refinery. And when this refinery is in full production and is profitable, it contributes more than 26% of Mossel Bay's GDP. And therefore we can sustain the local economy of Mossel Bay. Importantly, we can save all the jobs in the Petro SA. And as you know, the beneficiation of oil and gas has got a huge ripple effect on the economy. So yes, we've got a good opportunity to support the country's economic recovery.
We're on day 3 now at Africa Energy Week. What have been some of the highlights for you?
The big highlights, I think, has been the consistent message from our African leaders that Africa has got to be allowed to go on to beneficiate its oil and gas resources. As you know, the latest biggest recoveries, including from South Africa, are from Africa. And therefore, Africa is going to be allowed to continue exploiting its petroleum resources in order to develop our economies in the same manner, by the way, that the economies of the West, as well as China and India, have used these resources to develop their economies to where they are.
Do you feel positive and confident that a lot of what is being said at the Africa Energy Week will actually be implemented?
Definitely, I think it is Africa's time, and I think we saw the commitment from our political leaders that we will use these resources to allow for economic recovery of Africa.
How long has the company been operating for? And can you take me through some of the key or notable projects that you've been involved in?
Oh yeah, so we've been operating for about 2 years now. We're a very young company. But very quickly, what we've done is to divide our development imperative in 3 phases. The first phase, we focused on developing a very strong downstream portfolio, like I said earlier, basically building gas distribution centers that supply gas volumes to industrial complexes. Today we have over 12 to 13 industrial customers today that take gas from us. So our first phase was really to build a very strong downstream portfolio. But what we've done is that we're trying to work across board to become an integrated player. The whole idea is to incentivize, production of natural gas, as a fuel for power generation and for industrial development. So very quickly in the last 2 years, we've developed a city gate capacity of over 70 million scf per day, and that's providing power for over 300 megawatts, across board in Nigeria, to the grid, like I said earlier, and off the grid. But on the second phase of our development, we are working with gas producers today to incentivize midstream gas development. So the whole idea is to create more gas supplies from their existing portfolio in such a way that it can meet our increasingly growing downstream portfolio. So on our second phase as well, we are developing industrial park and industrial hubs. So we'll be inviting several investors to come and set in gas-based industries, steel companies, ceramics manufacturing companies. We have all the volumes that you will need to set up a very profitable energy business within our industrial park. And our third phase is to expand the range of our gas supply to cover Africans, just to more or less pushing gas beyond Nigeria to other African countries. And so we are developing a floating LNG that will take gas volumes from Nigeria. Our first capacity will be about 70 million scf of gas per day. It should be commissioned by Q2 2022. The whole idea is to push out gas through virtual pipelines out of Nigeria and to other demand centers in Africa. So more or less we're an integrated player playing across board in natural gas space.
Take me through your experience in terms of setting up such an organization within this space in the current investment climate.
Okay, so I'll tell you, we operate in Africa. Obviously, we know the challenges of operating or setting up a business in Africa. You have the infrastructure gaps. You have, of course, bureaucracy that typically drives most businesses, in the continent. Of course, you have some of the macroeconomic challenges, especially from the country where I operate in Nigeria. We've been having a bit of, macroeconomic instability with our currency. Given the fact that most of our businesses are high capex that are dependent, on equipment that have been imported, we have such challenges in terms of fluctuations in FX and their impact ultimately on our cost. But I think that beyond that, what we've seen is that African governments, have more or less set out very clearly to centralize natural gas, as an important fuel for transforming the economy, for improving the energy landscape, and for industrializing the continent. So that's commitment and policy. That commitment has been evidenced by policy, very clear policy directive, right, in terms of promoting natural gas, has more or less emboldened business like us to go into the space, and take the risk and make the investment that we see us, accelerating natural gas production in the continent. And I think that we are excited by some of the development, especially with the African Continental Free Trade Agreement that seeks to promote, trading among African countries. And I think that this conference, we've seen it massively supported. We've had ministers from several countries in all here saying the same thing, that they're ready to engage in inter-African trading, and we will certainly be using energy to support those wonderful initiatives that will promote increased energy supply across board in Africa.
So there's a lot of conversation taking place at the African Energy Week,
Absolutely.
especially when it comes to the energy transition, for example.
Yeah.
How will these conversations, or what highlights have come out of this event that will directly impact you and your business? What has come out of it for you?
Okay, so that's a wonderful question. I think the first thing we've noticed is that, look, most African countries in the past have seen oil as a mainstay of the economy, most oil and gas producing nations, right? But like I said, the evolution towards realizing the importance of natural gas, right? It's not just one that maybe countries like Nigeria, is working on. I'm seeing that across board. Several countries in Africa are beginning to realize that, look, we need to promote natural gas, we need to promote our resources in a way that helps to improve our energy security, industrialization. So let's start by saying today, Africa has one of the lowest energy per capita in the world, right? unfortunately, our population continues to rise. By some statistics, 1 out of every 3 people that are born in the world from now into the year 2040 will be born in Africa. And I think that's a big of a concern because we're struggling, first of all, with inadequate infrastructures, and then to then realize that our population will continue to rise, and we need to provide sufficient energy base to feed this population. That's a huge task. But the point is, the cross-border support engagement that we've seen from this African Energy Week has shown us that indeed, if we collaborate together, there are massive opportunities for us in terms of the energy landscape. Because today, in Nigeria alone, we have about 200 million people. But if you look at an African landscape that has about 1.3 billion people, that's a huge market. That will obviously mean increased, gas and power infrastructure projects to meet the energy requirement for that market. And then secondly is that we think that the conversations around the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and how it's more or less creates an industrial hub in Africa means more gas for us as a company that's operating in natural gas space, because we can obviously find new markets, creating industrial hubs across Africa where we can get our gas and support their efforts.
Today you experienced firsthand South Africa's energy crisis with the load shedding. These experiences or these challenges that we have in South Africa, Nigeria can relate to. Right? Can you take me through your experience or your view on the current energy crisis here in South Africa, and what kind of lessons can be shared between the two nations?
Okay, so I'll be honest, for me it's interesting because obviously to make a contrast, South Africa, you guys are you have a much developed infrastructure base when it comes to your electricity grid. The generation capacity, I think, is about 40,000 megawatts today. Contrast to Nigeria, where we have about 4,000 megawatts, evacuation and distribution capacity. But obviously, we can see that even with what you have, there's still a need for you to ramp up generation capacity to meet your increasing energy needs. And I've experienced the load shedding every day. We've seen what it means. What it basically says is that we need to have a coordinated approach as Africans in solving our energy requirement. And I think that the fact that you are experiencing this challenge means that we still need to develop our continent as one. Otherwise, we're going to be having some sort of a mismatch in terms of our development imperatives, as a continent. So the lessons learned for me is that there are obvious. First of all, you have a strong grid. You have clear paths in terms of the generation, imperatives to meeting your increasing energy need. But obviously, we've also heard from the minister that you're looking to support, you're looking to work with, gas suppliers, energy providers across board to more or less, meeting your energy requirement. I think that's an important thing for us. We know obviously that South Africa can be a very good market for us as well, supporting with natural gas, supply. And I think that QSL certainly will be playing very heavy in that regard.
Okay, may I ask how old you are?
I am 34 years of age.
34 years old. That's very young, and the reason why I'm asking is that I'm not seeing a lot of youth, especially here at this event. I'm not seeing a lot of youth taking up these opportunities within the space. Absolutely. Are you seeing that on the ground?
So, that's a conversation that I certainly would love to have with, and I think I've told a couple of people that I've spoken with that today our challenges are very real. Unfortunately, we are disproportionately affected in Africa because we perhaps emit less than 2% of all the carbon emissions in the world today. But unfortunately, socio-economic-wise, climatic-wise, we are affected heavily. My city in Lagos today is at the risk of being submerged to the Atlantic, right, within the next 100 years. And of course, I talked earlier about the population that is rising. Young people are going to be at the tick of the receiving end if we don't find solutions, practical solutions to solving our problems. Because 100 years, 20 years, 30 years forecast, we are going to be affected. It's going to be our time, it's going to be our responsibility to make things right. It's good that we've seen a couple of youth engagement across board, especially with regards to the climate energy transition, and I think that's fantastic. I think we need more young people coming into the space. It's not just talking about it, but taking steps, practical steps, pragmatic steps, to closing the gaps that we identify from time to time. So it's a wonderful time for young folks to get involved in the energy space. I want to say that for a very long time in Africa, we've been told about our challenges, We've been told about our constraints, and I think from time to time when we go to conferences, what we hear a lot is about, these are the challenges, these are the constraints, these are the reasons why you cannot develop at this space or get closes gaps or whatever it is. I think that I'm excited so much that for the first time in a long while, especially what I've seen in this conference, we have Africans taking that step to say we want to create our solutions, we want to find the solution in-house, we want to work collaboratively together. I think that we must continue to have a narrative that suggests that we're making progress, because we are making progress. As much as we talk about the problems, we should focus as much as possible on the solutions. And there is no society anywhere in the world that doesn't have a problem. You just have to continue to work on the solutions, and before you know it, you're going to certainly solve your issues. So that's what I wanted to say.
After 4 days, the packed program at African Energy Week came to an end, having brought together an array of prominent African policy leaders and business people.